Hello everyone, this is Dr. Supriya Singh, Assistant Professor in the Department of English, Vasant Kanya Mahavidyalaya, affiliated to Banaras Hindu University. I'm offering you a 4 weeks course on the topic Understanding Deconstruction, a Critical Approach. And this is lecture number 5 of week 1, titled Roland Barthes Shifting Theoretical Paradigms. Now, in the previous lecture, we have done with somewhat about the second order of signification regarding Roland Barthes, because he has talked about a step ahead from the Saussurean notion of single meaning in order to move ahead for the political implications that are there in the meanings. Now, here we are further moving a step ahead in order to find out how, though he is sticking to structuralism at various levels, but he also moved ahead by talking about the writerly texts, and so in his further writings. So he is a kind of bridge between the structuralism and post-structuralism. So here in this particular lecture, we will be dealing with his book S/Z or S/Z, and his very popular essay, The Death of the Author, where we find that in S/Z, he is discussing about a set pattern that he finds in text. But apart from that, he is also talking about writerly text. And in Death of the Author, he is completely deconstructive in his notion, because he is including readers' participation. He's talking about the birth of the reader and the death of the author. So let us move to this present lecture. Roland Barthes evolved from a structuralist viewpoint to embrace post-structuralist ideas, notably in his book S/Z and in his essay The Death of the Author. However, we cannot say that he was a structuralist in one and a post-structuralist in the other. Rather, we find that he shifted gradually from structuralism to post-structuralism, and the two isms are visible parallelly in his S/Z, whereas he seems to be completely towards the side of the post-structuralism in The Death of the Author. Now, coming to his 1970 book S/Z, we find that in this particular book, Barthes seems to shift his stand from being a structuralist to post-structuralist. However, we also see that he is, when talking about certain fixed codes in the structure of the text, he is structuralist, but at the same time, he moves towards deconstruction through his concept of writerly text, where he lays emphasis upon the significance of readers' interpretation and challenges the traditional focus on author's intention and biography to understand the meaning of a text. Now, this particular book is actually has its basis upon Henri de Balzac's novella Sarrasine. And Barthes uses Sarrasine as a case study to illustrate two basic concepts, that is, 5 codes of semiotics and readerly and writerly text. And both these concepts are quite important. Now, coming to the 5 codes of semiotics, let's see that Barthes basically employs a semiotic approach, analyzing the narrative structures and codes within the text to understand how meaning is produced or constructed in a text. He identifies 5 narrative codes, basically, that structure the text and contribute to the meaning making process. Now, these 5 codes are the hermeneutic code, the proerotic code, semantic code, symbolic code, and cultural code. Now, coming to the very first one, that is the hermeneutic code, let me tell you that this particular code refers to the gaps, the questions, mysteries that arises in the text to engage the readers for active participation in detecting meanings in the gaps. So here we see that how he is at the same time structuralist as well as post-structuralist. When he is talking about the 5 fixed codes in a text, he is talking about the structure, the underlying patterns of a text, because a text has these five fixed sort of codes. But when he is talking about the gaps, the mysteries, and the interaction of or the participation of the readers in order to find or to fill the gaps, to find out the mysteries, to discover the second layer of meanings. So, this way, he is more towards the post structuralist notion. So, we see that this particular text is a kind of text where he is perhaps on both the isms, that is the structuralism and the post structuralism. So here in this particular code, he basically refers to the questions, the mysteries, the gaps that arises in the text to engage the readers for active participation in detecting meanings in the gaps. And this filling of the gaps can be done with the help of the provided clues in the form of the written text. So here he is again very much like Derrida, where Derrida talks of that there is nothing outside the text, and in order to go with the meaning making process, we have to take recourse to the various ideas that are scattered there in the text, and this way meaning is not outside, rather it is scattered only in the text, and the idea and the responsibility of the reader is to explore or to fill the gaps, to explore the scattered meanings. Now, this particular code, according to Roland Barthes, requires the readers to know the overall structure of the text so that they would be helpful. It would be helpful for them in order to search for the meaning and the flow of narrative. This way, this particular code focuses on the mysteries and enigmas within a narrative, the questions and uncertainties that keep the reader engaged and seeking answers. Now, the next one is proeretic code. Here it refers to the sequences, basically. It refers to the actions, the events, and basically the sequences in the text. It attracts the readers to anticipate what will happen next and how the plot will unfold. So, it is basically more about sequences and the sequences of actions and events. It creates tension and suspense in the text, and so as to keep the readers engaged. To fully understand the meaning, the reader must pay attention to the cause and effect relationship between the action and the events in the text. And thus, this particular code deals with the action and events that drive the narrative forward, that make it to move forward, the plot and the propelling of the sequence of the story. Now, next we have the semantic code. This particular code refers to the meaning of a words in a text. It is basically meaning oriented. It refers to the use of language, how it convey ideas and emotions, and in order to get it completely, we can go for the denotative as well as the connotative meanings. So here we find that this particular code is focusing upon the meaning, and it is used to convey specific message or themes to the reader. Thus, this code explores the meanings and associations attached to the various objects, characters, events, statements, words, and this way it is more metaphorical in nature. Now, coming to symbolic code, we see that it refers to the symbols particularly, where symbol can be an object, a character, symbolizing something. It may be a setting or so. So, this code basically conveys abstract ideas or emotions that cannot be expressed directly in words. Thus, this particular code examines the symbolic structure and it enhances the range of the text, because a symbol can go for layers of meanings. It can represent larger ideas or concept. Therefore, symbolic code is something that is more towards post-structuralism, that is more towards the layers of meanings, more towards the mythical or second order of signification. Now, coming to cultural code and the last code, we see that it is even more towards post structuralism in comparison to other codes, because here it refers not only to the text but it is about the knowledge about the culture. It refers to the shared culture and knowledge which both the reader and the author brings to the text or adds to the text. This code particularly involved the reader to understand the historical and cultural context in which the text was located. So, in order to understand the text and its meaning entirely, the reader must know the time and space in which it is written. He must know the social, political, and cultural norms in which a text has been located, as well as he must know the cultural, social, political norms in which he himself belongs to. And only through the interaction of the text and the reader's cultural background, this code comes to give a kind of complete but yet incomplete meaning. Because here we are now in a position to be more towards deconstructive criticism, because here he is incorporating not only the text, not only the language, not only the meaning or symbols that is there in the text, but it is more about outside the text, that is the cultural milieu, the social milieu, the political issues that are going on. They too would play significantly in understanding of this particular code that is there in the text. So this way, these codes emphasizes that meaning is not fixed or stable, but is constantly being constructed through interaction between the reader and the text. And here we are completely towards deconstruction when we say that meaning is not fixed or stable, but is constantly being constructed through the interaction between the reader and the text. So reader should be active, he must be active, he must actively engage in the process of interpretation to explore the various levels of meaning. So it is now very much clear here that apart from talking about the structure, a set underlying pattern in the text, Roland Barthes gradually moves up to deconstructive notion. Now he's more towards the notion of deconstruction or post-structuralism when he talks of the readerly and writerly text. Now, according to Roland Barthes, readerly text is one that is giving a complete closed meaning, a satisfying meaning, where we go by the author, whereas a writerly text is one where we find that readers are participating in the meaning making process. Here we have experiments with the language. Here we have connotative meanings. Here we have layers of meanings. So, writerly text is one where reader is not just the reader, rather, he becomes a co author. So, he gives this way the idea of readerly and writerly text, where he distinguishes between the two, saying that the readerly text gets dominated by the author, and these texts are closed and they offer a single predetermined meaning, whereas writerly texts, which are open to multiple interpretations, invite the reader to actively participate in the creative process. It is more dynamic and liberating form of literature as it frees the readers, it makes the reader free from the bond of the author's intention. It is free from the authorial intent. And this way, a readerly text is one that is easy to consume, conventional, it follows the traditional norms, traditional narrative structures. It is not challenging the reader to carve meaning by his own. Here, the meaning is clear, fixed, indicated by the author, and the role of the reader is therefore quite passive here in the readerly text. He has to do nothing but just to receive the meaning given by the author. And therefore, such texts have linear narrative, they have clear beginning, middle, and end, and the reader is positioned only in the position of consumer, not as a participant. Whereas a writerly text, in contrast to this, invites the reader to participate actively. It often is non-linear, fragmented, moves in the to and fro motion in the time and space. It is open ended. It does not provide any meaning. It demands for the creation of meaning from the side of the reader, and this way, reader becomes the co author of the text in this kind of text which is open to multiple interpretation with complex language or experimental language. Now, through this concept, Roland Barthes thus favors, he comes up in the end, after discussing these two types of text, he comes up in the favor of writerly text and argues that it is a reader centered approach in this particular sort of interpretation, and therefore, further, we find that he moved in or moved with the idea of the death of the author. But before that, we also find that he is giving another concept, the pleasure of the text. And this essay has been written in 1937, where he basically talks of the two types of pleasure. One is pleasure giving text, and the other is bliss giving text. And it is it can be seen as the writerly and readerly text, because text of pleasure gives a sense of closure, satisfaction. When reader goes with such kind of text, they achieve pleasure because they are very much, readerly text. Readers passively read it, consume it, and he feels a form of satisfaction. Whereas text of bliss is something that gives us bliss. And here he says that writerly texts are those texts where we find that they give us bliss, and that is higher sort of pleasure than pleasure. So it is giving a higher sort of happiness as compared to pleasure. So this way he has said that it is in writerly text that we get bliss instead of pleasure, because reader participate, reader interact, reader comes up with all the creative process in order to make the meaning of the text, and it becomes co-author. So here again he is talking of the texts which are challenging and which have disruptive meaning, that are considered as text of bliss. And writerly text provides such bliss. It challenges the reader's assumptions, disrupts their comfortable zone, and can even induce a sense of disorientation or loss. But there is some sort of higher sort of happiness or pleasure in this disorientation, because it is more intense, potentially violent form of pleasure that pushes the reader to engage with the text on a deeper level. Now, coming to the concept of intertextuality, let me tell you that it is a term or a concept given by Roland Barthes in his popular essay, The Death of the Author. In terms of the text and authors, Roland Barthes, this work, Death of the Author, proclaims a remarkable shift towards deconstructionist approach in its methodology and assumptions. In this particular essay, Barthes announced that all the texts are connected to all other texts in an unending chain of intertextual relations, giving the concept of intertextuality. Now, what does it mean? It means that intertextuality is something where a text is not complete, closed, straight-jacketed element. Rather, the two cover pages can be considered as porous, where they are taking ideas from the texts which are written in the past, and it is going to influence the texts which are there, which will be written in the future times. So this way, a text is not a straight jacketed text. Now, what does it mean? That no idea is original, no text has original idea. Somewhere or the other, we are influenced from some past ideas or the past texts or the past philosophies and so on. And whatever we write in the present text is naturally going to influence the text of the future. So this way, when he is talking of intertextuality, it means that no text is original, or no text is the original piece of the author, written only by the author. Rather, a text is porous text where ideas are not limited to a text, rather it flows and it moves in the all academic, linings, all academic lineages, and there is no boundary that a text can be considered as an original text. So it is spreaded, the knowledge is spreaded throughout, and it is just a piece of writing where somebody has expressed it in one's own word. Now, coming to particularly The Death of the Author, which is 1967 essay, a very popular one, where the author has emphasized, where Barthes has emphasized that a text meaning is not confined to author's intentions. Instead, meaning is produced through the interaction of the text with its readers, allowing multiple interpretations to flourish. Now, this is one of the main idea and one of the most popular notion of Roland Barthes, where he comes up with the notion that text is produced and not consumed by the reader, leading to the death of the author and the birth of the reader. This way, Barthes highlights the plurality of the text and emphasizes that there is no definite margin or center to a text. Now, what does it mean? What is the meaning of the death of the author and the birth of the reader? Let us imagine that if an author is not interfering with the meaning making process and readers are made free to interpret the text in their own way, then we will be having multiple meanings. Plurality of meanings would be possible. So, here, what Barthes is intending to say, it is that after writing a text, the role of the author is over now, and he should not interfere in the meaning making process, and it is open for the interpretation by the readers. So those readers, or all the readers who will interact with the text, they will come up with their own meaning, and therefore we will be having multiple meanings of a particular text. And this way he says that the death of the author, right, like after writing a text, the author is not playing any role, he is almost dead for as far as the interpretation is concerned. And the birth of the reader means now the reader would open to go on with the interpretation process, giving it multiple layers of meanings. This way, Barthes highlights the plurality of text and emphasizes that there is no definite margin or center to a text. Every text is a weave of many other texts. This essay critiques structuralist idea from a structuralist perspective, which indicates that the author's role is to manipulate the system of science to create meaning within a specific context. Now, Barthes critiques authors' intention in the meaning making process. For Barthes, Saussure contradicts himself as he says that meaning can be carved out on the basis of signifier evoking a signified, and simultaneously, he also indicates that there is no inherent connection between the signifier and the signified, but a signified gets evoked with the signifier because of the convention that has been prescribed or allotted a meaning to it. Now, here he says that according to Saussure, there is a signifier, and when we utter a signifier, naturally a signified gets evoked to it. So, when Saussure says that there is a signifier and a signified, now we find that there is actually some connection between the signifier and the signified, and that is why as soon as we utter a signifier, the signified naturally comes along with it. But further, he says that there is no natural or inherent connection between them. Rather, we find that it is through prescribed usage that the signified gets evoked with the signifier. However, now again a question arises that if a signified is attached to a signifier, it means that signifier is going to evoke a signified on the basis of the notions that has been created with conventions. But then, in order to interpret a text, what is the role of the author? Will the author change the meaning? Will the author change the convention? So this way, Roland Barthes questions the role of the author in the meaning making process, and he says that what is the use or role of the author if the meaning and the sound, or the signifier and the signified, both are there in a text, then what is the role of author, how he can change the meaning making process, how he can affect the meaning making process. So, according to Roland Barthes, this is something that is not innocent. Rather, he suggests that meaning making process is political and dependent upon the power play. Author being powerful is going to command over the meaning, and this way, meaning is not in the signifier or the signified. Rather, he says that if there is a signifier and signified within text, it was not possible to pour meaning from outside. So, how author is regarded as a generator or controller of meaning? Barr says that considering author as the final arbiter of the meaning is an illusion. The presence of the author and his authority commands the meaning of the text. Similarly, the conventions are commanded by the powerful people, and that naturalizes the convention. And this way, signifier and signified, they are not because of the prescribed usage, rather because of the powerful play that was politically being played in the surface, so as to make, or so as to impact the meaning making process. Now, this indicates that the conventions are not tentative, rather, they exist in a particular social order or cultural milieu. And these conventional meanings are not innocent, rather, generated by the powerful class, leading to the powerful play. He actually blames structuralism that it naturalizes the conventions, it naturalizes the power play, the game of the power. So, this way, he comes up with the notion of post structuralism, discarding the idea of structuralism. Thank you.